The Zephyrian High Council had ruled the Andromeda trade route for 3 millennia. Their crystalline ships, powered by harvested stellar energy, had never known defeat. Council Admiral Vexthaner stood before the great viewing sphere of the flagship Eternal Dominion, watching his armada of 200 vessels spread across the void like a constellation of death. The humans sent only one ship, reported Commander Ziltex, his bioluminescent patches flickering with what his species considered amusement. Their response to our ultimatum is either incredibly brave or astronomically stupid. Vexthaner's 4 eyes studied the tactical display. The human vessel hung motionless in space, a dark wedge against the starfield. It was larger than their intelligence had suggested, nearly 4 kilometers long, but still insignificant compared to their armada. "What do we know of their technology?" the Admiral asked. "Primitive kinetic weapons, fusion reactors, basic shielding systems," Ziltex replied, reading from his neural interface. "They've only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. By all calculations, they shouldn't even be able to threaten our scout ships." The communication array crackled to life, and a human voice filled the command chamber, calm, measured, and utterly unimpressed by the overwhelming odds. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution. You have 48 hours to withdraw from human space. This is your only warning." Ziltex's patches flared brighter with what could only be described as laughter. "Admiral, their single ship is issuing us an ultimatum." But Vexthaner felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever spoken to the Zephyrian Empire with such casual confidence when facing impossible odds. His tactical implants began running probability matrices, searching for any scenario where such arrogance made sense. "Scan their vessel again," he ordered. "Full spectrum analysis." The results troubled him. The human ship's energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. Where Zephyrian vessels channeled stellar plasma through crystalline conduits, the Retribution seemed to contain something far more exotic: energy readings that made their instruments fluctuate wildly. "Admiral," his sensor operator, Kethmore, announced with growing confusion, "I'm detecting spatial anomalies around their ship. The quantum substrate appears to be unstable." Before Vexthaner could respond, space itself began to change. The human battleship started to glow, not with the warm radiance of stellar fire, but with something cold and white that seemed to pull light from the surrounding void. "They're powering weapons," Ziltex reported, but his voice had lost its earlier amusement. "Impossible," the Admiral breathed. "No single ship could threaten an armada of this size." That's when Admiral Chen's voice returned, and this time there was something predatory in her tone. "You had your chance. Let me show you what happens when humans get angry." The Retribution fired. But it wasn't weapons in any conventional sense. Reality itself seemed to tear apart around the human vessel. Ribbons of twisted spacetime lashed out like living things, each one connecting to a different Zephyrian ship. Where they touched, the crystalline hulls didn't explode, they simply ceased to exist, matter unraveling at the quantum level. In the space of 3 heartbeats, 50 ships vanished from existence. "What are they using?" Kethmore shrieked, his species fear response causing his carapace to flush deep purple. "What is that weapon?" Vexthaner watched in horror as his fleet, vessels that had conquered 100 worlds, were erased from reality as casually as wiping marks from a slate. The human ship hadn't moved, hadn't even seemed to strain its systems. It was as if the act of annihilating a quarter of his armada was beneath notice. "Full retreat," he commanded, but even as the words left his translator, he knew it was too late. The Retribution began to move, accelerating not through space but through the quantum foam that underlied reality. It wasn't bound by the lightspeed barrier that constrained every other known civilization. The humans had learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of existence itself. Admiral Chen's voice filled their communications array again, but now it was being broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring every ship in the Armada and every listening post within 50 light-years could hear. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire has demanded tribute from worlds too weak to resist. You've enslaved entire species, stripped planets bare, and called it order. Today, that ends. Another wave of spatial distortions erupted from the human ship. This time, the effect was different. Instead of destroying the Zephyrian vessels, the quantum manipulations seemed to reach inside them, selectively targeting their weapon systems and engine cores. Within moments, the most powerful fleet in known space had been reduced to drifting hulks. How? Vexthaner whispered, his tactical implants failing to provide any rational explanation for what he was witnessing. The answer came not from his crew, but from the human admiral herself. The Retribution's quantum communicators bypassed their shields entirely, projecting Chen's image directly into their command chamber. She was smaller than most species they'd encountered, her dark hair streaked with silver, her brown eyes holding depths that spoke of battles fought across impossible distances. But it was her smile that made Vexthaner's blood run cold, the expression of a predator that had finally found worthy prey. You want to know how? Chen asked, as if reading his thoughts. Let me tell you a story about humanity, Admiral. We're the species that looked at nuclear fire and decided it wasn't destructive enough. We're the ones who cracked the genetic code and used it to create plagues that could rewrite entire biospheres. We turned artificial intelligence into weapons that could think faster than gods. She gestured, and the image shifted to show the interior of her ship. Vexthaner saw corridors filled with technologies that defied comprehension, machines that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, energy conduits that bent spacetime around themselves, and at the ship's heart, something that his mind refused to process, a contained singularity that pulsed with the rhythm of a beating heart. But our greatest achievement, Chen continued, wasn't learning to split atoms or manipulate genes or even bend reality to our will. It was learning when to stop. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over, and each time we pulled back from the brink. We learned restraint, Admiral. We learned to channel our destructive impulses toward protecting instead of conquering. The implications hit Vexthaner like a physical blow. You're saying, humans could have developed these weapons millennia ago? We developed them centuries ago, Chen corrected. We just chose not to use them. Until now. Around the crippled Zephyrian fleet, more human ships began to decloak. Not the massive dreadnoughts that other species might deploy, but sleek, efficient vessels that radiated the same reality-warping energies as the Retribution. They moved through space like sharks through water, their quantum drives leaving trails of twisted spacetime in their wake. The Galactic Council received our application for membership last year, Chen explained, her tone conversational despite the cosmic forces at her command. They rejected it, claiming humanity was too primitive, too violent to join civilized space. Perhaps they were right about the violence, but we're not primitive, Admiral. We're just careful about showing our true capabilities. Vexthaner realized that his empire had made a fundamental miscalculation. They'd assumed that a species' technological advancement was directly proportional to their willingness to display it. They'd never encountered a civilization that possessed godlike power but chose to appear weak. What do you want from us? He managed to ask. Chen's smile widened, and Vexthaner saw something in her eyes that spoke of justice delivered across interstellar distances. Reparations for every world you've plundered. Freedom for every species you've enslaved. And a new understanding that the galaxy has a new sheriff, and we don't tolerate bullies. As the human fleet surrounded the helpless Zephyrian armada, Admiral Chen delivered her final message not just to Vexthaner, but to every listening civilization across the galaxy. Humanity tried peace. We tried diplomacy. We tried to join the galactic community as equals. But you mistook our restraint for weakness, our desire for coexistence for inability to fight back. Today, you learn the truth, we are not your victims. We are not your subjects. We are the species that survived 100 near extinctions, that turned our own destructive nature into the ultimate weapon. The Retribution pulsed with quantum fire, and across the galaxy, every major military installation felt their instruments spike as humanity's true fleet decloaked simultaneously thousands of reality-warping warships that had been waiting, watching, preparing for the day when diplomacy failed. Welcome to the new galactic order, Admiral Chen announced. Population, everyone who's willing to play nice. In the depths of space, the Zephyrian Empire's 3,000-year reign came to an end, and the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons, it had been their patience.